Welcome to Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. My name is Chris Caramanica. As a 15-plus year veteran in the apartment industry, I have stories to tell, a desire to hear and tell others' stories. As a multiple committee member for NAA, a CAMT advisory board member and a CAMT holder, and a national presenter and educator, I have met and worked with so many great people in our industry at all different levels. This is not going to be a how-to podcast. This is going to be a how-did podcast. We are going to explore the how-did tales in multifamily maintenance. How did we do it? How did we learn from it? How did we grow? How did we decide not to do it again? Join me as we go beyond the work. Lori, thank you so much for joining me today on Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we've had a couple, little inside baseball. We're both very busy. And we had some starts and stops. So I'm finally so happy to actually get you where our schedules aligned, the stars aligned. There was, nothing keeping us from talking. And you're somebody that I met a couple of years ago, and I really wanted to have you on. You and I have been able to share the stage at Apartmentalize, and that whole process 2 years ago in Atlanta, Georgia, that was fantastic. And recently, just last fall, you and I did a modified version of that with Multifamily Insiders, which was, again, it's just a lot of fun to, whenever we get together at industry events and we're able to talk, and, I like to share those experiences with others. So tell us, I know your story, or at least most of your story, and I know what you do, but why don't you just tell the audience what your role is and how you got into it?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for being patient enough to, with all the starts and stops, make time to speak with me. I always enjoy a conversation with you. We always have great conversations. We speak about so many things, and we could probably talk for 10 hours, but I'll keep it short and sweet. So my story, first of all, I am actually kind of where you're from. I was originally from New York. I moved down to Florida many years ago. I've now been down here more than half my life, and I didn't start in multifamily. Shocker, as many of us have not. I was looking for an apartment in downtown Orlando, and the young lady who was touring me around the community asked me the question that would kind of change the course of my career. She said, "Have you ever considered a career in property management?" I knew nothing about property management, knew nothing about multifamily, but she was hiring, and I was kind of at a crossroads where I had a customer service and sales and management background. I wasn't really sure what direction I was going to go in with that, but I knew I wasn't happy with what I was doing. So it was just the right time, and she made the ask. And that's actually something I share when I conduct training, is when you're thinking about recruiting, sometimes word of mouth is the best way to recruit. Conversation for another day. But that's how I stumbled into the industry. But I started like everybody else, or I wouldn't say everybody, most everybody else does, and that's as a leasing consultant. So I worked on property for many years, up till about just over 8 years ago, within Royal American Management, an opportunity presented itself for a regional trainer position. And it was a full-time L&D based position. And the passion I have always had has been training and professional development. And no matter what role I was in, what industry I was in, that was always what brought me the most amount of joy, was really helping other people to get to where they wanted to go within their careers, or even if it was just comfortably and confidently doing their own jobs. That's what was in it for me. So an opportunity presented itself. I jumped at the opportunity. They afforded me the position, and they kind of said, like, the rest, as they say, is history. I have been now in a full-time learning and development role for over 8 years with Royal American Management, as I'm currently their director of training and talent development. So I have my hand in all things education-based within our company. So the training department supports multiple other departments within our company with their training initiatives. And one of those departments happens to be maintenance. And so the cool thing about that is I do get to work with an incredible corporate support maintenance department. They do tremendous work for our company. They really have changed the landscape of how maintenance is handled at the site level for Royal American. They really have done a whole lot to support our employees and are continuing to do more and coming up with new ideas all the time. And I think that's great. And I get to have a hand in that and helping them facilitate that. And so again, the joy for me has always been into how can I help? And so for me, that was an unconventional career path. When you're on site, and you know this, the path is typically, if you're on the office side at leasing, assistant manager, and then so on and so forth, maybe district, regional, and from there, same thing, kind of with the maintenance side, you go from a tech to supervisor, and you kind of have this predetermined path. And I kind of took a more unconventional path, or at least it was unconventional 8 years ago. You're starting to see a lot more roles like mine within management companies because they're bringing training efforts inward. And not that we don't depend on the industry, not that we don't depend on our local apartment associations or NAA to provide the, amazing education they offer, but there has to be something that's really tailored to your organization that speaks to your own employees. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. That's kind of my story. That's my heart work, as Dr. Debbie would call it. If you're in the industry, you know her.
Shout out to Dr. Debbie.
Always got to give a shout out to Dr. Debbie. That's my heart work, really, is helping employees realize their full potential and be able to comfortably and confidently do their jobs, which organically leads to them moving up within the organization.
Yeah, L&D positions, learning and development positions were really big in corporate America. I mean, for decades, right? But we really have seen, and it's been in multifamily, but we've really have seen a growth that probably came out of a need, right? I like to say that our industry is like 15 or 20 years behind everybody else. We were still doing carbon copy, work order tickets, 10 years ago when I was on site 10, 15 years ago. Whereas
maintenance was by today. You're like, oh yeah, that's cool.
And most manufacturing or commercial real estate was already doing things electronically. So, I just find it interesting, and I love to hear that more organizations, and I do see it, more organizations are, I don't think necessarily bringing it in-house is the right, my view is that I don't think they're necessarily bringing training in-house. I think that they've decided that training is essential. And they have the tools and resources in people like you, in people that already exist within the organization to train on a company's policies and procedures. You're a legacy employee. You've been with the company for such a long time. We're even starting to see the growth, while small, within the maintenance field, where we're seeing maintenance L&D professionals starting. Again, this has existed in other industries for years.
Where were they? Where were they years ago when I was on site? So I do have to agree with that. Maybe not bringing it in-house, but identifying individuals within your own organization. That's actually a really great point that you bring up, because the reality is, in order for me to understand the challenges of maintenance in the field, it helps that I've actually been in the field with them. It helps that I was a community manager working alongside my maintenance team to understand what their challenges are. You're working on several unit turns, and the water heater just went out on the third floor and flooded 5 apartments on the way down. And now you have to stop that turn, but there's a move-in scheduled, but then you have this emergency that's like a major I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but a major catastrophic issue. And it's like, so your attentions are divided trying to keep up with the things that, the monkey wrenches that are thrown at you almost every day. But identifying people who have that vantage point and have that knowledge to be able to expand upon that, and then, push that out to the masses in, and reinforce, company training, because they do have other methods of training. It's not just the live instructor-led training that we offer. They also have their required training, which, some of which is, regulatory, some of which is actually job specific from your learning management system. I think the need kind of was identified because for many years we focus on sales and, sales, leasing, training, and because that impacts your bottom line, right? The numbers, but maintenance impacts your bottom line. Resident satisfaction often stems in what? The maintenance of their apartment home, the maintenance of the community. When you're looking at things like online reputation, a lot of the reasons people are either really satisfied or really dissatisfied, again, stem from maintenance. So it's kind of like, yeah, we're a little bit behind everybody else, but the light bulb kind of went on. People just kind of realized that, wait a minute, maintenance has just as much of a profound impact as your sales and leasing training. The other thing that I have found, and not only working with teams in the field as a manager, but now being, a training director and working with, with maintenance teams in that capacity over the years, they want training. They've always done what they know how to do, but they also understand that there might be a more efficient way to do things. They don't mind being shown that way. If it's going to make their jobs easier, if it's going to make things more efficient, if it's going to make things better for them, they want that. So I think for many years we kind of made the assumption that, oh, they were good. We hire strong, knowledgeable people and they know what they're doing. Yes, that is true to a degree, but that doesn't mean that there's no room for learning. There's no room for improvement. They want the training. They also want the path to upward mobility within the organization. And we can't assume otherwise. So I think a lot of things kind of were identified over time. We've kind of realized that was kind of a missing element where you have to, like, this area is it's such an important part of our business, especially like in a company like ours. 70% of our portfolio is fee managed. So you're working for someone else, you're maintaining someone else's asset. And so the difference between whether they continue working for you or maybe not also stems from the actual maintenance of the community. So I'm glad to see the tide has turned and there's more of a focus on that. I'm also grateful to work for an organization that recognizes that there is a need and they encourage every program, every concept, all the things that we're doing, they encourage and we have their full support, because that's also important.
One of the interesting things that you've said to me a couple of occasions and just before we started talking today is that you're a creator of education programs. And I think that's amazing, right? I think that when you are creating, and I've, created sessions, training sessions for either internally within my organization or externally for associations or presentations. I want to look at maintenance through a very specific lens with you. I think that you may have a unique perspective. Whenever anybody in our industry talks about training maintenance, right? I always like, well, what do you want to train? And, I just sit back and I absorb the things that come, like, oh, well, Johnny doesn't paint the wall fast enough, or Suzanne's not really good, with plumbing. And I'm like, okay, cool. But we're training the wrong things, in my view. And feel free to agree or disagree with me, especially as somebody who came up, is what I have seen is maintenance professionals, for the most part, are technically sound. And I know it's a broad generalization. Yes, they could, unclog a toilet faster or, caulk a bathroom, a little bit neater, right? That's part of training. That is part of learning and development. But we're seeing schools that aren't providing that technical training, or people coming from different industries that may have that technical training. What are some of the areas that aren't technical? Because Lori, I'm sure you know how to turn a wrench and I'm sure you know how to paint a wall. But what are some of the non-technical areas that you feel as a creator of education that maintenance professionals should be learning either within their organization through their L&D program or outside of their organization through, an affiliate or a national program? What are some of your thoughts on that?
So glad you asked this question, because can you teach somebody a more efficient way to do a manual task all day, every day? Are there YouTube videos out there that you can watch about troubleshooting or making a repair or replacement? Absolutely. If you are a maintenance professional, what do you need to be focusing on? If you are in a leadership position, or if you plan on being in a leadership position, or just generally you are working within a team, what we call soft skills training. So it goes beyond the actual technical expertise. We need to be training in other areas such as customer service and the impact your customer service has on your customers. We need to be teaching you conflict resolution. We need to be teaching you, crisis management. How often is it that as a maintenance professional, you enter an apartment home and you walk into a very difficult situation? Maybe a resident has passed, for example. Where's the training for that? Where's the support? Do they know does your maintenance team know, if you are a manager, if you're regional or otherwise, do they know what employee assistance programs are available within your organization? Do they know that they can pick up the phone and call you if you are the regional manager? Do they have a way to reach you? There's just some of the things to think of. You have to think about that. They also need that soft skills related training that is applicable to any environment, but most certainly the one they're working in. But you also have to think about one of the things that our local affiliate did here, and it went so incredibly well because it's not training they usually receive, is they provided a leadership, maintenance-based leadership program. And within that program, they actually taught things like how to read financials. They looked at a budget. There was a lot of financial conversation. Maintenance employees are often, ordering parts or ordering replacement appliances. And so what is the budget implication? But having that financial workshop for them was tremendous. So just if you're thinking about like, how do you train your maintenance employees, you have to think about it's not just technical skill that you have to teach them. You really have to, if you really want to provide a culture that embraces learning, that embraces inclusivity, then you need to teach your maintenance team essentially as you train your office team. There is no difference. They are all there for the same greater good, and they are all there for the success of the property, the success of the organization, their own personal success. They're all part of the same team. So how about we start training them like they're part of the team? In the past, historically, it's always been that, of course, a leasing consultant, would take, some soft skills related training, working with difficult customers, for example. But why haven't we ever thought to train our maintenance folks, give them any guidance on how do you deal with the difficult customer? Because they also have to deal with difficult customers. They have to deal with our residents. They are more forward facing with our residents, really, if you think about it, than the office teams. So really, it's just thinking outside of the technical aspect. I think people have always associated maintenance training with technical skill, and it has to encompass so much more. That's what they need and what they want.
Yeah. I like what you said there about we should be training maintenance the same way that we're training the office. And, my dear friend, and you know him as well, Paul Rhodes, says, our industry treats our sites like they're a football team, and there's offense and there's defense. And, I agree with his analogy, but I'm going to trump him on it and say, but you know what? At the same time, the offensive line of a football team and a defensive line of the football team are all sitting in the same meetings. Now, they may have separate meetings, but they are all part of a team. They are all learning the strengths and weaknesses of their opponent. They're all, whether you're on offense or defense, the offensive line is learning the offensive weaknesses of their opposing team, even though they never see that in a game day situation.
Right. Aren't there game day plays of the coaches going over and it's like all right, here's everybody's role on the team, but everybody gets to see the same information. We don't train our teams that way, though, not historically, not for what I've seen. And that's what needs to change. They deserve the same level of attention, the same level of guidance that we have always provided the office team. Like, it's not that it's their turn, it's that everybody should be trained with the same emphasis and the same guidance and the same mentorship and coaching as the office team. And that's something that, I don't see has changed enough. I see steps in the right direction. I know within our organization, we certainly have, we have taken upon not only doing it with our current employees, but any program that we create, for example, has a mentorship piece to it. Your mentor and you as the mentee go through mentorship training at the beginning of any program. That's your person throughout the length of the program. But we understand that if we're going to develop our maintenance teams, that it has to be at all levels to include, yes, the technical training, but also the other training that they need. That's what a fully developed program looks like. For example, we launched Pathway to Career Development last year, and that's our first ever professional development program. And we started with maintenance. We started with where our greatest need lies. And that is that, again, the focus has always been leasing, assistant community manager. And, the heaviest training schedules have always been for them. So we started intentionally with maintenance. And so there were two pathways to start with. Again, it was a pilot program. And pathway one was the path from a porter or groundskeeper to a technician. And then pathway two was from a technician to a supervisor. We have not even completed that program. We've already promoted two of our employees to their desired positions within that program. That program included multiple phases, which started with the aspects of training that they haven't been exposed to as much, if at all. So it does start with, working with a team playing, customer service, conflict resolution. All of those soft skills courses is what the program began with. So once they get their footing and they understood that, then we can move on to the more technical training. And it's also having a mentor and having a regular check-in. What that allowed us to do was everybody is at a different level of understanding. Everybody's at a different level of learning. We can tweak a program or tweak a pathway for an individual once the mentor kind of gets involved and says, all right, they might need a little more time in this area. No problem. The program's flexible. So one of the things you have to, and my reason for saying that is if you're listening in the audience and you're thinking about, well, how do I do this? First of all, one, start where you are. You're not going to have a fully developed program like that overnight. It takes a lot of work. It takes, we had a task force of people involved at different levels. That's not where you're going to start, but there are things you can do. But whatever you do, first and foremost, don't lose sight of the training that they don't usually get. A, B, be flexible and understand that these may be new work concepts to them. So they may need a little more time with it. They also need the real world application to it. And so no matter what training's available, whether they seek outside learning, many of our maintenance supervisors, for example, have their CAMT. Our entire corporate maintenance department does. No matter what outside learning, what is the real world application when you bring that back to the company? Where's the conversation? See, our regional maintenance specialists and our head of our maintenance department, they spend all their time in the field. They're not just there doing a property walk. They're there saying, all right, what do you need? What can I help you with? Let's walk your maintenance shop. Let's take a look at let's take a look at your books. Like, what do I need to help you with? And then they can identify also training needs from there, and not only give me an idea as the training director to help them create future programs, but also it really just we are able to respond in real time to what their actual needs are. And so there's so many things. I mean, I just think listen to your employees, ask the tough questions. What do you need? What would benefit you? And really comes down to, Chris, I remember when I was on property, we had to have, as I'm sure everybody does, a weekly meeting with the entire staff, right? But that didn't mean that you couldn't still have breakout sessions with your office team and your maintenance team over what their individual needs are, right? So that's an excellent place to start. If you are having a breakout meeting, and right now you're listening in the audience and you're a manager figuring out how can you better serve your maintenance team, talk to them, seek that feedback. That feedback creates an environment where it creates almost like a circle of safety, if you will. If you make the ask and then provide the resources, you further gain their trust. The more you're able to support people organically, the harder and better that they will work for you. It starts with making the ask and then following up and following through is something anyone can do. I mean, I didn't create the wheel, so to speak, right? Everything I research and I pull together and everything I help, our head of maintenance, when we're putting together these concepts for these programs, where are we pulling that from? Online. It just takes time to look, but it also takes a desire to want to help and an understanding that you have to manage your own expectations, that when you are, teaching somebody something, again, everybody's at a different level of understanding and learning. You might have to be more patient with one person than you do for another, but they deserve that. They deserve that level of support. They deserve that level of coaching. And again, that's a place where anybody can kind of start.
Yeah. Another way that I always try to express to people that they can start is don't assume if you're on the leasing side or you're the management side, that maintenance professionals know the same terms that you do. Right. So, I forced myself to learn the office side, right? I've never leased an apartment, but I know enough of the language that I understand. I learned budgets, but I had to learn what loss to lease was. I had to learn what lost rent was. I had to learn all these things, vacancy loss, all those different things that I needed to learn.
Right.
I asked the question, but I also had really good people that knew maybe I wasn't asking the question. And maybe, Chris, do you know what vacancy loss is? No, I don't. Here, let me show you what it is. Once I started to learn some of the managerial concepts of whether it was financial accounting for multifamily or the leasing process or tours or things like that, once I started to learn that, I started to get better at my job because I understood how my job directly affected those things that were traditionally office. And it's not anymore. It's all the same pot.
Right. I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. On both sides, be curious. If you are and not shockingly, somebody we both admire, recently I saw them speak and they said something that just kind of has now stuck with me. If you are a leader, be the leader of inquiry. If you are the learner, be the learner of inquiry. Always be learning, right? And so that stuck with me because curiosity, they say it kills the cat. Curiosity, ask questions on both sides. You don't understand, office terms, ask, what does that mean? What does a lease agreement look like? What's in a lease agreement? Don't assume that anyone knows. One thing I also host a management training program within our company that's policy and procedure based. And that's another pathway program to a policy and procedure compliance. And one of the things I'm always telling them is do not assume that they know. Do not assume that things were happening in a procedurally correct fashion prior to you taking over that property. You need to know what they know. You need to know what they don't know. And then you need to fill in the gaps. That's how you get people to trust you and get on board with your ideas and your vision. Is you've got to be curious. You got to make the ask, and don't do it in a way where you're questioning. Let me be clear. Don't do it in a way where you're questioning their qualifications, but do it out of genuine curiosity. Because also, if you're on the office side, you don't know the inner intricacies of maintenance. You know enough about maintenance to run a property. You don't know enough about maintenance unless you've been in a maintenance role to actually do what they do. You all can't do what each other does. But at the time, you can. We have one of our regional managers started on the maintenance side. He started, again, in maintenance. He worked his way up. He moved over to the office side, and now he's a regional manager for us. Wonderful success story within our organization. But don't assume that, if you're on the office side, don't assume that they know. First of all. Second of all, don't assume that they don't want to know. Don't also assume that the path forward for them encompasses just a maintenance path. We have people in our organization that have started in a traditional maintenance position and have moved over to, the leasing side and then, work their way up that way. So don't assume that because somebody is on a maintenance path that they don't want to be an assistant manager. They don't want to be a community manager. Don't make the ask. What does your future look like to you? How can I help you get there? And don't make assumptions because you might be wrong.
So we are wrapping up our time here, and I have a whole nother topic that I want to cover with you. So I'm going to have you come back because we've talked a lot about, you talked in various pieces of our talk today. We talked about career ladder and how you grew, how you're growing people. But also you had a career lattice. So I'm kind of teasing up getting you back because career lattice is something, it's the new, nobody talks about a ladder anymore. It's a lattice where there's opportunities in different departments or in different types of organizations. And that definitely exists in maintenance. There's no question about that.
Centralization is causing us to have to reimagine the positions that need to be in place to continue our business forward. So that's a whole nother conversation. We're not doing centralization, but obviously I'm very familiar with the concept. I will say it does forge a path for people to focus in area of their area of expertise. That's an identified role and a new unconventional path to forge. So yeah, I'm happy to come back. Have me back anytime.
We're definitely going to talk more about that. But, I wanted to give you just a minute as we wrap up here. Do you have any upcoming speaking engagements or any way, how could audience members, reach out to you to learn more about what you're doing at Royal American with your programs?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. It seems like it always goes so quickly too. I think we could probably talk for hours. I don't know, maybe it's where we're from or just who we are, or just, the nature of our personalities. But anyway, it's always a pleasure, Chris. Thank you for having me on. So how can you connect with me? LinkedIn, I post everything I do within our organization as well as within the industry. On LinkedIn, I'd be happy to accept a connection request, or if you want to follow, I always follow back. I'm happy to be part of anyone's journey. I'm here for questions if anyone has, or if they need guidance on resources. And again, I share everything. I'm very active on there. Aside from that, where am I speaking? I will be back at Apartmentalize this year. Excited about that. And this year will be talking about training and inclusivity with training and just kind of the current training trends, kind of a little bit of what I've touched upon today with the kind of the shift in focus, especially, with maintenance. That's some of what I'll be discussing with two other fabulous presenters, Megan Orser and Joelis Barandica Rodriguez. So catch us on Friday, June 13th. We'll be on first thing in the morning at 9 a.m. Woo! Can't wait for that. After the Thursday night block party. I will be good, I swear. And then aside from that, I will be working with some new clients this year. Details forthcoming on that. There are some new associations that I have not worked with previously that I will be working with this year. So again, if you want to know, stay tuned and reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lori, for joining me today on this episode of Beyond the Work. It was a real pleasure, and you will definitely be back because you and I are not done talking. And my listening audience, I promise, Lori, I'll be back in the coming weeks. But thank you so much for joining me today and Lori for another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye, all. Thank you for joining me for this episode. No matter how long you've been in our industry or what position you have at your company or your community, everyone has a maintenance story to tell. Go to www.multifamilymedianetwork.com and leave me a voice message or share your information and we can tell your tale together on a future episode. Please check out our sponsors and like, subscribe, and follow to this podcast or video and join the Multifamily Media News Network newsletter for upcoming shows and blogs from me and the other great hosts on our network. Our stories all connect us. See you for the next chapter.